eventually. Heritage Foundation and a columnist for the Daily Caller and townhall.com. Carl Frisch, a syndicated columnist and progressive strategist and partner with Bullfight Strategies. S.E. Robinson is the deputy director with the Paul Revere Project and a contributor to The Blaze. And now joining the panel is an expert on money and politics, Lee Fang, investigative reporter at United Republic's Republic Report and contributor to the Nation magazine. Last week, and welcome, Lee. Glad to have you. Glad to have you with us. Last week, Republicans in the Senate killed the DISCLOSE Act, which would have forced any disclosure of any contributions made to an organization that spends more than $10,000 on any political ads. While super PACs are forced to reveal their donors, at least eventually, public charity groups, or what are known as tax-exempt 501c4s, don't, just so long as those groups don't explicitly call for the election or defeat of any particular politician. Koch brothers helped fund one of these so-called charity groups. It's called Americans for Prosperity. As the Las Vegas Sun reports, AFP may have gotten itself in trouble for abusing its tax-exempt status, getting a little too political with its electioneering. If so, then the Kochs may just have to reveal who their other donors are, though it likely won't happen until after the election is long over. But the Kochs aren't alone. Center for American Progress has compiled a laundry list of corporations that are funding right-wing causes, including Marriott Hotels, Angelsoft, Waffle House, Gold's Gym, and Charles Schwab. So the question is, do the wealthy in America have too much influence in our politics? And should those who wish to spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, in an election be forced to reveal their identities? So, Lee, you were on HBO's The Newsroom last night.
Yeah, it was a nice cameo.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, exposing the Kochs. So what's the story here with the lack of transparency in American politics?
Well, this is the big issue. In one hand, we have the entire country realizing that after Citizens United, and really after a string of Supreme Court decisions, the wealthy corporations and some unions have really taken advantage of this new campaign finance landscape and have lavished campaigns and outside groups with money. But the other big problem is that much of this money is undisclosed. When you see these ads on television, no one knows who's really buying them. Even the journalists don't know because of these tax loopholes that allow secretly funded groups, mostly 501cs like these 501c4s and c6s. There are some legislative proposals to fix the problem. There are some cases working their way through the courts. But at the end of the day, we still don't know. We still don't even know who really bought the 2010 midterm election. Something like 90% of the outside money came through these secret groups, and the problem's only getting worse with this election.
Has not been disclosed.
Has not been disclosed, and you know,
that was hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions of dollars from groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and lots of innocuously named 501cs like American Action Network and what have you.
Now, back, I forget the year, but Mitch McConnell actually voted for, back when 527s were the new, the big new fad. Another part of the tax code. Politically active groups. Republicans and Democrats both wanted disclosure of these groups.
Right, that was the traditional debate. You had Democrats who wanted caps on spending and contributions, and you had Republicans who wanted disclosure. Now that we have unlimited spending, unlimited fundraising, we have almost the entire Republican Party in lockstep voting against disclosure, and that's what happened last week. The DISCLOSE Act, which would have forced these secretive 501c groups to comply with the law the same as PACs or super PACs, it was the filibuster. They didn't even allow, the Republican Party didn't allow debate in the Senate over this very common sense bill that was the same as the 527 debate in 2000. 14 Republican senators voted to force 527s, which were the secret money kind of loophole back in the day, to be disclosed. Those same senators today won't even allow debate on the bill.
And yet the major contributors to Democrats are labor unions, and ever since 1947 with Taft-Hartley, labor unions have to disclose every penny, do they not?
They do. They have to disclose to the Labor Department. Some argue, I think, rightly, that maybe those disclosure reports should be updated quicker than they are, but they do have to disclose every penny. Now, the DISCLOSE Act would apply to everyone, unions, corporations, individuals. It would simply say these front groups, I would call them, have to disclose where their money is coming from, regardless of the source.
So, S.E., how is this not a good idea?
Well, I mean, as a journalist, I'm always in favor of having more information out there, but I think that there are some very real problems with disclosing these donors' identities in terms of their own health and welfare. Because as the reason why they want them to be disclosed is so that they can shame them publicly and try and influence public discourse that way. Well, and I think that that's a consideration that comes into play.
In a democracy, that, for example, your boss, Glenn Beck, he's the Blaze's head man in charge. He's friendly with the Kochs. He goes to their big meetings where they wine and dine with GOP senators and whatnot. The people that are capable of giving tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions and billions of dollars, we shouldn't disclose that they've given these monies to push in support or against candidates because they might get their feelings hurt if, say, the head of the Marriott Hotel Corporation does it. They might picket their hotel, and that's a bad thing.
It allows for the setting up of an enemies list. So if you're an enemy of the federal government, you'll make a list and you'll be shamed.
So it's okay that the unions be publicly outed, but it's not okay that billionaires be publicly outed.
Well, first of all, unions are effectively carved out of the DISCLOSE Act because of the way it was drafted. I mean, unions get their money from mandatory contributions.
Unions have had disclosure requirements since 1947.
Yeah, but this DISCLOSE Act was unilateral disarmament. It only went after the corporate donors, did not go after unions. It also had a provision in there that didn't allow any issue ads during presidential campaigns for a very long period of time, which may be an infringement on the First Amendment. I mean, you look at this law, there are some serious constitutional concerns with the way they drafted it up, and it's all politics.
And the false
we know it wasn't going to pass the House.
I've heard one right-wing talking head after another say that unions are going to spend $3 billion in this election. It's just it's a flat-out lie. What they've done is they've taken this Wall Street Journal, number, which we're not even sure as to whether or not that number is accurate, and they've said this is what they're spending this year. That number represents the last 3 presidential cycles. The corporations and moneyed interests in this election cycle will spend far beyond $3 billion. They'll spend over $1 billion that we know of, let alone what we don't know they're spending.
Lee, you mentioned that unions were involved in this, in the DISCLOSE Act. Did you misspeak, or?
No, I mean, I'm not exactly sure where Mr. Darling is coming from, but the DISCLOSE Act applies equally. If I fund a group, or I create a group called Americans for Puppies, and I run nasty attack ads against anyone I think is against puppies, the DISCLOSE Act would force the donors of my group to be revealed. They could be a union, they could be a corporation, or it could be several wealthy individuals. It would apply equally.
Helmsley's dog.
Exactly.
So
it just targeting Mitt Romney.
Yeah, it was occurring to me. Does anyone, we used to have, in the first 50 years or so of our republic, most elections were held by people getting together in towns and raising their hands. And then the secret ballot came along in the 1820s and really kind of took hold by the 1850s. And we've had that since then. But there's always been, it seems, a belief in American politics that we should know where the money's coming from.
Well, Justice Scalia has argued in favor of disclosure, saying that one should have a civic responsibility to take responsibility for their own actions in an election cycle.
This was in his Citizens United concurrence.
Right, and there are bigger issues that are involved. You could say, look, Aetna, for example, gave millions of dollars to these secret groups in 2010. It was never disclosed during the election. People saw those ads. They had no idea where they're coming from. We only know that Aetna gave that money, the health insurance company, because they accidentally disclosed it to a regulator. But the conservative argument against this, that, or at least the Republican argument, that this will allow the government to create an enemies list and to find all kinds of political adversaries and somehow attack them or something, is not fair, because these 501c groups already disclose their donors to the IRS. They just don't disclose them to the public and to the press.
So, S.E., isn't this